In this, the third and final part of our conversation with Pam Parish, we talk about Pam's books and how she got started writing them. So, Pam, as Kayla mentioned, you've written at least one book, and I know you've written two more. Would you like to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so the three books they're really just devotionals for foster and adoptive families, or especially the gift could be used by anybody in the foster care arena if you're a case manager or work for an adoption agency. But it really came out of my own story. I honestly never set out to write books. I never in high school said I want to be an author. It never happened. But way back in like 2012, I was on the phone with a case manager who was just really having a hard time dealing with some disruptions that she had had in Christian families who had said, we're going to adopt this kid. And then less than 3 months later, they're saying, you've got to come get him or her because we can't do this anymore. And her heart was broken. And she said this profound statement to me. And she said, I understand how hard it is. But what breaks my heart is that these people love Jesus. And I don't know what this kid walks away with of his image of Jesus.
Mm. Yeah.
And it breaks my heart because I don't want these kids getting hurt and not understanding that Jesus loves them because a family was well-intentioned but couldn't love them in the right way.
Yeah.
And so I went to bed that night and I was like, Lord, if there's anything I can do, just let me know. Because I mean, it was breaking my heart too, because I had never really thought about it in that perspective, that what we do as Christians, when we step into this kid's life and we promise them we're going to adopt you, that this is going to be forever, and we love Jesus and we love you, and then 3 months later, yeah, it's hard. I mean, we've hit the mud and it's hard and we can't do it and we give up. What does that kid walk away with of their idea of the Lord? 5 o'clock the next morning, the Lord woke me up and gave me all 30 days of Ready or Not, which is the first devotional. I literally wrote it down on a scrap of paper, all of the topics and the scriptures.
Wow.
In like 30 minutes, it was just boom, 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 boom. And 2 weeks later, I was at an orphanage. I wrote all of the devotions. I came back and I put them on my blog. And I never intended to publish a book, but through a series of events, I ended up being at a meeting with an organization in Georgia called Promise 686, and they were starting a foster care initiative called 111. And they needed two things, and that's the whole purpose of the meeting. They needed someone who could teach the impact training and a spiritual component to go along with it. And I happened to have both because I was certified by the state to teach.
Wow.
And they took a look at it. It ended up getting into the hands of Andy and Sandra Stanley at North Point Ministries, who are also foster parents. And they are the ones that encouraged me to make it a book. And really, North Point, the group questions at the end of each devotional, their group curriculum office wrote that for me in that first book. So that's kind of how I got started with the books. Yeah. So Ready or Not, the first one is because of that conversation with that case manager. Ready or Not is specifically from the heart of God about considering what it means to step into these kids' stories before you do it. Or even after you've done it, going back and really reminding yourself what the word says and evaluating. Because every one of us as believers is called to the orphan and the fatherless. Every one of us. But not all of us have to move them into our home.
Right.
We can answer the call in other ways.
Right.
And we need to, rather than just being moved by a great message on a Sunday morning for the fatherless and jumping right in, we need to carefully consider what this means from a spiritual perspective. So that's Ready or Not. The second one is Battle Weary Parents. And that one was literally...
It should be parenthetically. That's all of you.
That's right. That was written because I was battle weary, and I was having those days with so many of my kids in crisis at the same time that I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it another day. Literally, the Lord had me walk through every day of that devotional. And I remember asking him, can this just be 10 days? Can it just be 15 days? Because it was so hard. And it was really God just dealing with my heart on what it looks like to stick with it when it's so hard that you don't know, that you really just want to pull the covers up over your head in the morning and not even get up because you just don't know if you can face it another day.
Yeah.
And then the gift, which is the one that released in May, it's really a study through James chapter 1. It occurred to me a few years ago that our banner verse for foster care and adoption is pure and undefiled religion before God our Father is ministry to the widow and the orphan in their distress. And that's James 1:27, but that's the last verse in that chapter. And if you rewind all the way back up to verse 2 and read verses 2 through 26, you'll realize that what it takes to do pure and undefiled religion before God our Father is outlined in those 26 verses. And that's the gift that God has given us when he calls us into this journey. He's giving us a gift of refinement. And it's not the refinement of our children. It's our refinement as his children. And so I wrote the gift to kind of help people understand that there is something in this for us. And it might look like fire, but it's fire that's burning away the chaff of our life and making us more into the image of Christ.
Well, I have been so blessed by reading The Gift this summer, just with a group of moms. We have just gathered at at one of the moms at her house. She's just opened it up to us, and we've had just different moms, as the summer schedule, we've had different moms, and every week we are just so blessed by just the words that you have in there. The questions are very thought-provoking and make us just dive into deeper relationship with each other. And just reading through it has been so, so good. And I've read your other two as well, and they're fabulous. And I try and get the Ready or Not, the first one, I always try and get into the hands when I know there's a family that's thinking about adoption or foster care, because disruption is one of those things that breaks my heart, and it makes me so sad. And I know nobody goes into this journey thinking this is going to be so hard that I'm going to quit.
Nobody.
But I know that if they just had a few more questions asked of them, if they had a few more things told to them about this journey, if they had just the encouragement that, so many people think, oh my gosh, I must be a bad parent because how can I not love this kid? And so I think if they just realized that they're not alone, that they could maybe even just keep going another day. And so I love those because they're just such good questions and such good insight. And they're really not overwhelming as a mom. Oftentimes devotional books can get a little overwhelming or they're not enough. They're just such a tiny little bite size. So I think they're just the right size that I've just really enjoyed being able to just dive into scripture and the questions that you ask. So thank you for those books. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for reading them.
Yeah.
Pam, one of the things I found fascinating about the gift, well, I guess all the devotionals, is that they're not intended for just one person to go through. And they're not necessarily intended as a quote-unquote couples devotional either, but they are designed for you to go through with someone else, because we know we've got single parents who are doing the adoption and foster care journey, and they need somebody else, a support person, to be to walk alongside them. And I like how it's structured in that vein, and it doesn't matter if you're two parents or a single parent with someone else helping you, everyone's going to benefit from it.
Right. Well, I think it's especially important for single parents to think about that, because you can't do this alone. You first of all need Jesus in every minute of every day of it. And second of all, you need someone who gets what you're doing, who understands it.
Yeah.
Because they've researched, they become your advocate for when you're tired and you need a meal, your advocate when you need some prayer cover, because we all need that sometimes. Like, hey, I'm in the midst of it with my kids right now. I need some prayer cover. And you need somebody else who really gets this with you. So going through it with another person, especially as a single parent, is critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
I heard something recently. I was at a conference and the guy spoke. He said, research has shown conclusively that when it comes to looking at ourselves, human beings are delusional. And that's why it's so important, not just for all of those things that you guys are just talking about, but like I will generally either think more highly of myself than is real, or I will not be willing to look at the hard stuff that needs to change, right? So we were talking about this yesterday with a friend of mine who, he and I have been friends for about 20 years. He's also the person who gets credit for introducing Kayla and I to each other. And so we were at somebody's birthday party last night. Because my kids are all in New Mexico with Kayla's parents, so we get to go to like adult birthday parties on a Thursday night because of that. And so we were talking about that, and we started talking about our relationship over the years, and kind of as we were just kind of unpacking that a little bit, the thing that he and I both agreed was the thing that was kind of the most valuable thing that had come out of the last 20 years is both of us feel the freedom to speak bluntly, for lack of a better term, into the other person's life. And when we've and the relationship that we've had, that if I would go to him and seek counsel as I have before and told him what was going on and told him what I was going to do, I remember one time he said to me, I would not do any of that. And I just listened because he'd gone through so many hard things with us and just done life together for 20 years. And the great thing about that relationship is he and I don't see each other all the time. It's not like we're constantly with each other, but because there is so much traction on the road, and I think that everybody needs that, right? You need at least one person in your universe, and you need more people in your universe who will feel like there's enough relationship there that they can deal with the hard stuff with you.
Right. It's like the example Kayla gave out of the gift where my husband said, you need a redo.
Yeah.
I was totally in the wrong. I wasn't 100% in the wrong, but I handled it 100% wrong.
Yeah.
And caused a bigger issue. And for him to have that freedom to look at me and say, you need a redo. You need to go back and repair this with our daughter because you handled it wrong. That was something I needed to see. And I honestly, I would have been delusional and I would not have seen it in myself.
Yeah. Because in the moment, it's hard to actually see. I mean, sometimes we walk away and we go, ooh, that was really bad. But sometimes we feel justified because of the way the other person behaved until somebody says, no, just because they weren't behaving properly doesn't mean you get to behave improperly.
Right.
You don't get to feel justified because they yelled at you that you were able to yell back or whatever the case may be. But yeah, Ryan and I have always had this kind of we've had code words over the years where if we're in some kind of a disagreement with one of our kids, or we're in a situation where things are starting to get ramped up, we would say a code word. Most recently, our code word has been, I think you need to go get some pineapples. And that way we can kind of almost check out of the situation without confronting the other one in front of the kids, right? So we can kind of say, hey, do you need to go get some pineapples? Now, of course, one of our teenagers has figured that out and just makes him laugh. But, I think just having that relationship that you're able to have someone speak into your life and say, you need to take a little breather and come back to the situation because you're not responding correctly is good. And like you said, for single parents, finding that person that you can, that can come alongside you on that journey and that's going to support you and not say, it's probably too hard. Maybe you shouldn't have done this. It seems like it's really, getting you down and maybe this wasn't what God was telling you to do after all.
Well, the single parent idea is really important, right? Because Pam, you said that when you guys first came to adoption and foster care, it was a lot international adoption, which it was here for us too. And it was, the primary, like everywhere when we came to this thing, the number one, if you kind of create like a profile of who's adopting, it was people who were adopting internationally for reasons of infertility was kind of the common thread that was weaving. But over the years, in terms of people who, have come to the ministry for help and for parent interventions and stuff like that, there's been a growing trend towards single foster parents over the years. And I remember a couple of years ago, we had an event that was only for single parents. And so on the registration for the event, on the registration form, we asked, we're going to do a Q&A at the end of the time, but if you could just submit some questions in advance so we could kind of go through them, that would be helpful. And we got those questions, and I was surprised. Well, it was a lesson for me because none of the questions were about anything that I thought was going to be questions like, well, how do you recommend I go to the grocery store after I get home from working all day? Because I got nobody to tag out with. How do you deal with this situation? Because I have nobody who can help me in that situation. This is, of course, predates just, opening up your Amazon and having them ship food to you, bring food to your door in cool little silver bags. So there are just a lot of things that I think, whether you're single or married or, that can be solved by having a dispassionate person who is able to look at the situation a little more objectively than you can. Somehow, Kayla, here's an example. It's completely unrelated. Kayla has a friend who is a single woman, and she had an issue, and she actually called Kayla about it last night and just kind of talk it through a little bit and let her know about it. And I thought, that's some wisdom there, because you realize, okay, this thing's not going the way I wanted it to. Let me seek some outside counsel. And I think sometimes, I know I do take it for granted that there is somebody who is willing, who can say, hey, do you need to go to the store and get some pineapples? And sometimes I say, I do. And sometimes I'm like, no, we don't need any pineapples. Leave me alone. Trying to yell at a child. What are you doing?
Well, that was going to be what I said, is that the challenge is that you have to give that person permission to speak freely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Because otherwise, if you're going to bite their head off every time they try to speak truth to you, they're going to very quickly learn not to speak truth. So you have to kind of give that person the freedom to say it harshly, if that's what you need to say. Just say the truth, and then we can unpack it and make it pretty as we talk through this. But we just need to get it on the table. Yeah,
and I think from an attachment perspective, if you don't have some people in your life who have that freedom and know they have that freedom, my friend Chris, who hosts this thing here, he's pretty straightforward with me. But you know what? I didn't meet Chris yesterday either. We've done some life together here over the years, and I think that when you're looking around and you don't have any relationships where people feel like they can speak truth into your life, then you, from a pure attachment standpoint, you probably need to consider: do you have any healthy relationships in your life? And if the answer is no, then you need to address that, because, and we literally don't have time to get into this, but that's like unpacking your history, that's unpacking your present, and all kinds of stuff to get to that point where you feel like people can have the freedom to speak truth into your life without feeling like there were going to be serious consequences.
Absolutely.
I think it just makes a world of difference having those people in your life versus feeling like you have to put on a show when you're in front of those people and make things look good. I've had parents say, well, I want other people to adopt, so I can't tell them that it's hard because then they might not do it. And I'm like, well, if you don't tell them it's hard, then when they get to the hard, they're going to be like, I want out. It's just me. Yeah. I'm the only one that's struggling with this, because everybody else around me, everything looks so good and wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, I say to parents all the time along that line, it's not up to you to protect God's reputation when it comes to what he calls us into.
Yes.
God's quite capable of protecting his own reputation, and he calls us all into hard. So if it's hard for you, it's supposed to be hard for them too.
Yeah.
It'll be what it's supposed to be for them if they're answering God's call.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I get a chance to speak to people who are interested in particular in becoming foster parents, and Kayla, Kayla has a waiting family group that she leads, and she told them, if you are all considering foster care and adoption, and every single one of these families goes ahead and gets licensed, then I probably wasn't honest enough with you about the process.
Right.
Because like you said earlier, everybody's called to help, but not everybody's called to help by having the kids in your home and parent them. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have a mom that she's getting ready to have some kids placed in her home, a kinship placement. And she's like, I'm terrified. And I said, good. I said, I think that you should be. If you weren't, I would be worried that you didn't properly understand what you're getting into.
Right.
And I said, but just because you're terrified doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Kayla, you need to write a book, and the title is "Terrified is a Great Place to Start."
I like it because that's what I said.
Hold on, let's
Write
build.
that down?
No, let's build on a good relationship and negotiate needs here. Are you volunteering to have the words "forward" by Pam Parish on the cover?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Awesome.
And we've reached a compromise.
I didn't even have to throw in a set of steak knives or anything.
Oh, Pam, I could talk to you all day. I just love talking to you about just your heart. It's so evident in your devotionals as we're going through and just in having conversations. I told the moms in our group that we were going to be having you on the podcast, and they're like, you got to let me know when that one's out so that I can make sure and listen. They were so excited because
why are they not subscribed already?
I know, right? I think some of them are. But they just said, I think it's so evident that your heart is for these vulnerable kids and your heart is for the parents who are parenting them.
Yeah.
And just making sure that they are well equipped and that they understand just the magnitude of what they're stepping into. And once they've stepped into it, that they're like committed, Mm-hmm. And so I just love what you're doing. And I'm so glad we could have you on the podcast.
Well, I love you guys. I couldn't be more clear that the work that you guys do has had a profound impact on our family. Honestly, these books probably wouldn't exist if it weren't for the work that you guys do. So I owe a great debt of gratitude to you.
Thanks, Pam.
That's very kind, Pam. Mostly unnecessary, but very kind.
I can be kind when I want to be.
Can you tell I have issues of receiving nice things in words from people? Try to deflect your compliment.
That's hilarious. Well, thank you guys for having me on. It's been such a fun conversation.
Thank you, Pam, for being on. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you guys.
And Ryan, Kayla, thank you for being on as well.
Awesome.
Absolutely, Chris.
Fun as always.
If you've got any questions for us that, and I'm sure you do after listening to this episode, you can email them to us at info@onebighappyhome.com. We've also got a Facebook group just for podcast listeners. You can search for the Empowered Parent Podcast Community. If you're really concise and you can squeeze your question into 280 characters, feel free to tweet it to us at onebighappyhome. If you don't subscribe to this podcast, and based upon what I just learned, some of you do not, you can do so.
Who knew?
That's right. You can do so through iTunes, the Google Play Store, or on Spotify. We're on all three. Just search for the Empowered Parent Podcast. If you've enjoyed and gotten value from our show, we would appreciate a review in any of these locations. The Empowered Parent Podcast is committed to helping parents of foster and adopted kids through connecting, correcting, and empowering principles. Thanks for listening. You can find out more information about Pam and her organization and her books online. Her website is pamparish.com. Connections Homes is at connectionshomes.org. And all three of her books are available on Amazon. And we will have links to those in the show notes.